I'd like to call to order the Apache Junction Water District meeting. Roll call.
Chairperson Wilson,
Here.
Vice Chairperson, Board Member Biggs,
Here.
Board Member Evans,
Here.
Board Member Gremmel, here, Board Member Nesser,
Present.
Board Member Schroeder,
Here.
and I will ask, is Chairperson Rizzi on the phone?
No, she cannot attend.
Okay, thank you.
This meeting, yeah.
You have a quorum, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Your Honor, I
Yep.
move that the minutes of January 19, 2021 be approved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Schroeder,
Yes.
Ms. Nesser,
Yes.
Ms. Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Biggs,
Yes.
Ms. Gremmel,
Yes.
Chairman Wilson,
Yes.
unanimous, Your Honor.
Okay. Do I have a motion for discussion and consideration of resolution number 2021-001?
Your Honor, I think Mike has a presentation for this one.
Oh, okay.
Before,
Let's do it.
if you'll consider hearing that first.
Yes. Okay, we'll do that first. We'll discuss it first.
Good evening, Chairman, Mr. Wilson, and members of the board. A quick presentation. So we're doing a public utility easement extinguishment. This is the first one I think a lot of you guys have been through. So city does this every once in a while, but I'll give you some details here. So it's located on 2024 South Cortez Road here in Apache Junction. It's no longer necessary for public use, and it's diminished public value at this point. So kind of give you a little bit more area. So if you're familiar with it, we are at Old West Highway, just south of Old West Highway on Cortez Road. So behind Barlean's or the Old West Machinery factory over there, their metal shop that they have. So there is a old dedicated 33-foot right-of-way as we have across here in Pinal County on certain sections. So the developer of the budget RV that's existing there, I think he is existing 10 acres. They purchased an additional 5 acres, and they want to extinguish these easements so they can fully utilize their property. So this is kind of more overall picture, so you got more of an idea of what's happening out there. As you can see, the easement on the right there is kind of in the middle of their property. They've currently used it as a driveway. As you get further to the west side, it becomes dirt, and then the furthest to the west there is actually the undeveloped land that they have. Along the north portion of their land, also they have their driveway coming into their property there, and then it goes all the way through to their undeveloped land there also. As part of this extinguishment, we're agreeable to extinguish the ones that go north and south, but the one that goes east and west, it's currently 33 foot. We have a water line that runs just north of their property currently. It's not on their property, but we reserved a 10-foot easement into the water district's name rather than just a general public utility easement. So we'll be signing off that at the same time we relinquish this easement to this developer/property owner.
Okay, do I have a discussion?
Did the other utilities sign off on it?
He's working through that process. Sewer worked with us also because they have a sewer line that goes through there, so they're in the process of going through the same thing, and they're going to keep a 10-foot easement also to make sure they can get their utilities through there in the future, and I cannot answer that with SRP and a couple of the others. The city has already relinquished this or extinguished these easements, so the roadways have already been taken care of.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Your Honor, I move that resolution number 2021-001, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Water Utilities Community Facilities District, City of Apache Junction, Arizona, declaring portions of the public utility easement located at 2024 South Cortez Road, Apache Junction, Arizona, are no longer necessary for public use and are hereby extinguished be approved.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Nesser,
Yes.
Ms. Gremmel,
Yes.
Ms. Evans,
Yes.
Mr. Biggs,
Yes.
Mr. Schroeder,
Yes.
Chairman Wilson,
Yes.
unanimous, Your Honor.
Okay, district manager's report.
Your Honor, I just wanted to give you a brief heads up, that the Central Arizona project and Salt River project have contacted both Mike and I to have some time to go over with you during a water board meeting some of their goals, some of their big picture work that they're doing. Won't be tonight. They kind of want to wait and do it in person, so they're kind of waiting a few more months through the pandemic. So just a heads up, they'll be separate. Sometimes we've had groups come in. So CAP can't take us on the whole big tour or helicopter, but they want you all to have a little 101 on what they do, as well as SRP as well. So just a heads up on that there'll be longer presentations, kind of policy oriented. Thank you.
Brian?
Yes.
Tell them that they can take us one-on-one on the helicopter
Okay.
tour. We won't object to that.
I will. Okay. I'll definitely let them know. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. District Director's Report.
So on state land agreements, we have a couple things on the agenda tonight that we're going to discuss, and I just want to kind of give you guys some language that we've been working on with the developers and how things are slowly developing on our state land process with all these agreements that we're working on and how the land's slowly starting to come up with some of these. So the first one that we've been working on probably for the last month here, Joel, I think, is our preliminary annexation and development agreement. So it's called the PADA. You guys will hear this language as we get through it. So the PADA. And then we have a master plan community, which is an MPC, which they'll go and show you how the community is going to be developed. And then we have the community facilities district. We got to do a development agreement also with them. And then we have a development unit, which now we go from an MPC that shows you the big picture of the 2,800 acres to a development unit, which is more of a quarter section or a sectional land, so a square mile, to down to a planning unit, to down like a quarter section or a subdivision with 250 units. So slowly as we go through this process, you'll see all these happen. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is really the next subject I have here after this. So again, the state land agreements that we're looking at, we have the auction property, we'll have a PADA with that, an MPC, a CFD development agreement, and then we have all these planning units and development units underneath them. And then the land that was retained by state land.
Is that enough acronyms for you?
Yeah.
I know how much you love them.
A cheat sheet.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, I was going to say,
go,
we
go,
do
to,
that.
go to work for NASA. and
Yeah, I could only
That's
imagine.
the only way you talk.
That's why I'm bringing these up now, because you're going to hear this a lot here in the next few weeks. I mean,
I need a reference.
I would say probably 3 months ago, I was in the same boat you. What are they talking about? And it keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then we have the retained property that state land still owns. So we'll have to be doing an agreement with them also and do an MPC with them. That's part of the state land when they auctioned off the property. They did a participation contract with the developer that they have to, I guess, do the development or do the MPC for the retained property. So they'll be taking care of that. So looking at these, we have currently, what they dealt with one single person, we have at least 6 different agreements that we'd be dealing with. And that was just be through the city. So what we're working on, we discussed this last time, is instead of the city doing these agreements, the water district having these agreements, and the sewer district having these agreements, so now we're talking 18 different agreements, we're going to pull them back. What we're trying to do is form an IGA between the city, the water district, and the sewer district. So again, what we're doing is the city would be the one sitting at the table, but we're in the background saying, okay, we need this infrastructure to service this property, and they would negotiate the contract on our behalf with our input in the background. So working through those processes, kind of this gives you a little input. So the infrastructure we're looking at, it was not just the city's going to decide on how it's built. We still use our specifications on the project. Everything that we do normally would happen. So even though the city's negotiating on our half, we're still in the background giving them the information so that we can work together to get this project moving along. So going from 18 agreements down to 6, hopefully that helps us work through things a little faster with the developer. So
People say government's not efficient.
Right.
correct. More efficiencies here. And then in the end, there's infrastructure that's going to be put in the ground. Currently, the city does not have a utility department. So that infrastructure for water and sewer cannot be given to the city. So it'll be given directly to the water district or the sewer district, since we haven't done this. Okay. This kind of goes back to instead of being a department, which could take us up to 3 to 4 years because we have to first go through a utility vote, and then there'd have to be another vote for us to be brought into the city as a separate entity, and then the sewer district would have to be voted in. This all comes from the citizens voting and taking time to go through that whole process. So the developer wanted to form their own community facilities district, and their community facilities district is not just like ours. They're not a water utility or a sewer utility. It's really a funding mechanism to provide that infrastructure to us. Okay.
So by doing it this way, are we prolonging the conversations of taking that to the voters?
That is a big discussion for you guys to have.
Great.
Essentially, it does. In essence, it would be very difficult with all the moving parts at this point to try to help our community. We believe that it'll take a couple years for us as a group and our wonderful Al Bravo, the wonderful PIO that he is, to help bring along our citizens to understand why we would need to change. So change, as we know, any change, you push, everybody pushes back. Why are we changing? They wonder why the government would want to get into the business. So it's going to take a little time, even though we know that the vast majority of cities and towns in Arizona are a department. We have talked about it in retreats over the years that this is a long goal to bring them in. When the state land, which was a goal that we've had also to have sold, finally was happening, it started to happen about the same time we had received direction to get the vote going. And ultimately, the developers were like, hey, let's just work with the CFDs that we have now. Let's create a CFD to be able to do the mechanism, financing mechanism that Mike references, to allow for tax-exempt bonding to bring in water and road and sewer infrastructure. And that's what this is. This is the ability to do that with a finance mechanism. Not to set up another department, not to set up anything like that. But it is another creation, right? It's another group that has to be monitored. And it will take more staff to do. But it doesn't mean that we don't keep our sites still out there to do that, to get a vote to the people. So we have to do a utility vote, like Mike said first, and then we have to do another vote to bring in each of the districts at some point. And I'm a strong proponent of doing it. Just, I think ultimately in Arizona, if you want to control growth, you want to do it the right way, you want to be the city government, meaning the elected officials, who our residents look to for policy at the highest level, should be over the water and the wastewater.
Now, Bryant, I know that these are still conversations that we're all having, but as the CFDs come into play, we have the choice of having it be council or board ran at that point, so that the 7 of us are the CFD board, correct? Or
Well, can you help with that on the legislation on how it works?
The law changed, council member, and it used to be that simple. You used to be able to appoint yourselves as the board. Then they decided to add another component. The developer gets to pick 2 more people. So you'd have a big board. So luckily, and Zach is not here yet, Zach Sakes is coming to talk about the CFD process and the procedure. He's been on top of the legislation because he's been involved in it. And there are efforts. There's legislation, I forget the House bill or Senate bill, but it takes away the 2 extra developer-appointed people. So that, I think, is still in committee, and it hasn't been voted on, I don't believe. So, but there still would be a board, and if you don't want to have the council as a board, another option is just to pick 5 people from the public, kind of like what we do with sewer district, or what the council did in 1992 with the sewer district, or 94.
We had this conversation a few months back, and
We did.
I think we decided to pick 5 people, did we not?
I don't remember that part.
I think we talked about it, but I don't think a decision was ever voted on, but there was discussion with it. You have a good memory. There was
I believe
discussion.
at the time, Councilmember Barker was like, yeah, she'd be on it, because she knew she was leaving the council, so that's what started the conversation about just appointing 5 people.
And that will be future discussions, and we can talk about it with Zach tonight on, where that legislation is. It would be, rather than have the council be the one that is, hey, my bill, the guy above baseline, they're only paying $3,000 a year for taxes. I'm paying $4,000. I don't know how much it would be for a certain type sized house, but because of the services down in that area, yes, there's going to be an extra charge. And they hopefully will know that in all the marketing that the developer's putting out, saying, yes, this is what it's going to cost you to live here, in addition to your other real property taxes, of which the city gets $0, by the way. So, anyway, I don't want to steal Michael's show.
No, Mayor.
No, you're doing a good job.
Oh, keep
Gail?
talking. Can you go back to the previous screen? Can you explain to me the difference between the auction property and the retained property?
Yes. So the auction property, if you remember when we initially started these talks with state land, it was 8,100 acres for the entire property down there. The developer worked with state land over the last year and a half, and they came up with the first 4 square miles, which is between Elliott and Ray, from Meridian to Idaho. So that's the actual auction property that they auctioned off back in November, which we're working with Brookfield and D.R. Horton on currently. The remaining 5,000 acres that's currently around that still is retained property that state land still owns.
We might be able to try to pull up a map. No.
Which map?
A map just of showing the 4 square miles and versus the retained property.
The retained property, though, still has to go for auction, correct?
Correct.
It's not
It hasn't been
purchased at this
auctioned
point.
yet.
That's correct.
But it will, its retained property is it's going to be a part of our
Right.
city limits. If-
Correct. The annexation map will include both.
And it'll be part of this
I think I have one
CFD.
map.
Yes.
Okay. That's
Well,
kind
it'll
of
be its own CFD.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to have multiple CFDs down south because of the way that it develops, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
But seeing if I
But
got,
But the
the CFDs
retained
won't,
property that's referred to will be a part of this first CFD, or we don't know yet?
No, it would not be. It would not, because we don't know who's going to buy it. It hasn't been auctioned. D.R. Horton might buy it, but we don't know.
See, that's what I thought you said, that the auction property was bigger.
The auction property, think of the retained as the area that isn't sold yet. It's the auction
State land
property is the
retained.
4 square miles. It's less than. It's about 2,800 acres.
Let me look.
But we're
I might have-
annexing the entire amount right up front.
Right.
Yeah.
oh,
And maybe that's a difference if you think about it as the annexation versus the developed, or to be developed.
That's the way I think of it. Yeah.
Because we could very much have 2 different CFDs, one for D.R. Horton and one for Brookfield.
Correct.
We will have that. Yeah.
yeah.
but these won't be CFDs like you're used to seeing with our water district and our sewer district. These will be strictly for a funding mechanism to build that infrastructure. We're going to walk you through all this when Zach continue, and well, not just tonight, but not tonight. That's really the IGA portion, but
That's correct.
we'll be very detailed in our explanation of how it'll all work.
Again, what this does is it allows you the ability to have the developer utilize tax exempt bonds and not have to have you vote on a property tax. Let's just be really upfront about what this is. It allows for, in essence, of the ability for growth to pay for itself, to have the future residents who are underwriting this and paying this off over 20 years, 30 years, to help be the one. They're the ones benefiting mostly from the water, the sewer, the roads down there.
Mr. Chair, I just had a thought. If,
Auction map.
how do I word this? If
There, that was it.
why does the whole city, why do all the residents vote on something when they won't be paying for it, and that's the reason for the CFDs, so that just the new people who buy down there will be paying for that? Shouldn't it be just the people who own the property, which right now is just one owner,
I got it right.
vote on?
That's a great
on it?
question.
Why does it go to the whole city if the whole city doesn't pay for it and own it?
Because Title 48 says so. It's the law, and it says there'd be 2 elections, actually. One would be the the people who own the original area within the boundaries of the original boundaries of the districts. That's election number 1. The next election would be citywide, And on that ballot would also have a funding question. Shall the city spend X number of dollars with bonds? So there's actually more questions than one on the ballot. But the first election would be just with the people who own the current boundaries or own the property within the original boundaries, not any expanded boundaries. And then the other election would be citywide. And that's a good question. Why?
Yeah, but the people up here that are in the city now have never owned that.
Correct.
One of the tricky parts, though, is that they will then take on some of the risk of those bonds, because ultimately the residents,
Yeah.
existing residents, are, whether you use a revenue bond or a general obligation bond, the residents then, meaning all of you who represent all of them, will be taking on that whole debt service as part of it.
But the trouble is, I mean, the residents here are going to have a tendency to want to vote no for something that's not going to affect them directly.
Hence my question that I think it's really important that we have a 2-year process to help people understand why we would ever want to be in the wastewater and the water business. You're right, it's going to take some time.
A lot of explaining.
But that would be only if,
A lot of explaining.
that would be only if we were talking about purchasing the water district, right? Not the bonding of the CFDs.
You mean the election?
Correct.
Correct.
Well, if you're going to purchase it, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, but I get, but if we form the CFDs, we're able to bond based off of the CFDs, as opposed to if we purchase the water district, we then have to find financing
Correct.
to not only do that, but then build down south.
That's correct. You don't need authority from the voters to create a CFD.
Okay.
And that's not the hard part for me, because I think we'll be able to get that. There'll be people that'll buy bond paper to do revenue to create the revenue to be able to purchase it. It's the really doing a good job of explaining why would you ever take on that debt.
Anyone else?
You have a question?
Okay.
Any other questions on that? There'll be a lot of that in the next electoral, like Bryant was saying. We're going to be going over this several times between the water district, the city. Everybody's going to keep going over this. It's going to take some time and work through this whole process with you guys. On a good note, I had great news this past week. I got an email from CAP. So in 2014, the water district put in an application when non-Indian agricultural water came up to reallocate out to individual cities based on their needs. We applied for that back in 2014, and they allocated 817 acre feet to the water district. Now it's taken them, 7 years to get through the government here to actually come up with a price and ready for us to order it. So in 2022, we can order that 817 acre feet of non-Indian agricultural water. The other portion of it is all the capital charges that have been saved up for the last 20 years. We have to pay those to get that water. So it's roughly $2,000 an acre foot to purchase that water. So roughly $1.6 million that we would owe if we still want this water, which I believe we should. We do want this. This is a good thing. But also, CAP, or the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board, is also to offer a 5-year payment plan. So we don't have to pay that next year. We can pay it over the next 5 years. With the new development we have here in the city, we have a water acquisition fee, and we have roughly about $300,000 saved up. We have another development coming that will pay another $250,000. So think over the next couple of years, we're going to have this paid for by that water acquisition fee we currently have. So it's not coming out of our operating budget. This is something that we saved up for this new development as we went through this process. So I think we're in good shape. You guys will see that in the budget this year coming up on how we'll fund these and the funding mechanisms we'll use. But just to give you an idea, this isn't just $325,000 that's coming out of next year's budget. We do have a way to pay for it. So, but it's really good news. This kind of gives you our portfolio that we've always talked about here. The first one up on top is at 2,919 acre feet of CAP water. That's municipal M&I water, so that's really high priority. So if something happens, a shortage on the Lake Powell, it has to get to a certain level, and we're at like tier 0 right now. It has to get to tier 3. So we're pretty much guaranteed that water until something major happens, and we'll know that several years in advance. We also have our groundwater capacity, which makes up 32% of our portfolio that we have. We're not currently using that because we're all using renewable resources right now. And the LTSC is long-term storage credits. So these are what's happened over time is the sewer district takes the water that they produce, they put it back into the ground, and we purchase those credits for them. We also, since we're not using all of our CAP allotment, we have some of it shipped down here and we put in our groundwater storage facility or groundwater savings facility that we have with several different entities out there. So those are the storage credits that's adding up over time. So we have those available to us.
Mike, real quick, for the 817 acre feet of water, once we own that, right? So if we don't utilize that or start using it in 5 years, that doesn't matter, it doesn't go away?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to get there though on that one. So
okay.
Hold your thought. So we did the 1,000-year lease, or 100-year lease with GRIC for 1,000 acre feet, which is about 14%, get ahead of things. And then the last one we just talked about, NIA water. So it's not as high as priority water as municipal M&I. So it's like a tier 2 shortage, we lose that water. So it's still pretty high in priority, but it's not as good as municipal M&I. So yes, it's ours, but it may not be as reliable as the other ones. Again, it takes a while for us to get to those tiers for us to have a shortage in our delivery system on our side. But the tier 0, take back cutbacks, people leave water back. Then we get to tier 1 where they start cutting off agricultural and different things. And then we finally start getting to tier 2 where it starts happening with residential customers or commercial customers and different things like that. So several tiers to get down there, but just to give you a heads up of where we're at with that. But definitely exciting times. It gives us a lot more for our portfolio. Even though we've counted it for a long time, we finally actually have that physical water available to us now. So great news, especially with this new development coming in. I'm working on our 2020 Arizona Department of Water Resources annual report that we do. Roughly last year, to serve to our residential and commercial customers, we used about 1,500 acre feet. So currently we have about 7,400, so we only use 1,500 of that. So we have quite a bit of water in our portfolio, but this first phase of state land is probably going to take up 80% of that. So we're going to keep looking at it again. Do we need to go out and get another GRIC lease? Do we need to go out, if there's any additional NIA water that we can go after? Do we need to do another groundwater analysis to see if there's more water that we can produce from the ground? So there's several options that we're going to keep working forward. Like Brian said, CAP is going to come in and talk to us about some of those things. SRP is working on some ideas too right now that they'll come in and talk to us about. So we're constantly looking for that next bucket of water, that next thing that we need to do for the future here in Apache Junction. So constantly doing these things. We're set up great right now, but as development happens, we're going to start needing additional water supplies as we move forward. Okay. Any more questions for tonight?
Okay. District Treasurer's report.
No report tonight.
Okay. And since that's done, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.